Okay, so I think we can start the webinar now. Again, welcome everyone. My name is Susanna Lorin. I'm the manager or lead or whatever for the IAAP Nordic chapter. So we are meeting today to talk about things about the Nordics. And because we have, of course, our friends from Finland here, we use English as our common language, even in the Nordic webinars. I'm going to introduce the panelists in a short while. We have another panelists kind of coming in where the microphone had some issues, so I will do that in a little while. But I just wanted to let you know that we are doing a short introduction here. We do provide auto captions for Zoom, so just if you push the CC button, you will get the automated captions from Zoom, which I think work rather well in English, not perfect, but rather well. You can use the Q&A functions for any questions you would like to ask to the panelists. And there's also a chat function where my colleague is supporting anyone who may have technical issues and so on. We are going to have a short introduction and then a panel discussion with our distinguished panelists from Norway, Finland, and Sweden. And then we open up for Q&A from all of you, and then we will finish as usual, very sharp 2 o'clock Central European time. So, and now we have even our fourth panelist with us, so that's good to see. But first, a little bit of introduction. So what is easy to read, really? That's a very good question, and probably something we will discuss today, I think, because the interesting part with this type of concept or term is that we don't really agree. And when I say we, I mean experts on accessibility and so on. We don't really agree on what it is. So, but let's start with distinguishing easy to read from plain language, because plain language is, I think, what everyone should be doing if you want it, what you should use when you write, if you want people to understand your message. So most countries have a plain language guideline for public sector and so on, and some of us even have legislation on plain language, and that is basically use active language, use pronouns, and so on. So instead of saying the report can be submitted using this system, you can say you can submit the report by doing this and that. It's kind of making it easier to understand. You are explaining difficult words and so on. So very, really common sense, I would say. And easy to read is basically the same thing. It's just taking it a step further, addressing people who have difficulties understanding even a very well-written text. So not even experts agree on the precise definition. And we have one panelist here who actually prefers to call easy to read easy language instead. So whatever I say now, somebody will disagree with me. I know that, so that's a good start. But I would say that easy to read was originally developed to support people with intellectual disabilities. And it uses common words and short sentences. So the basic idea is one idea, you can express that with one verb and you put that in one sentence. And then it often looks like poetry because you would like to have also short line length, which makes it easier, one of the things that makes it easier to read. And that is just for you to get a kind of an idea of how it looks if you think you have seen it somewhere or read it. It's interesting that it's usually kind of simplified and shortened because our research, and I think quite a lot of research shows that many of the people who benefit from easy to read, they actually need more context and more background and more explanation. And yet we kind of do easy to read very short. So there is a complexity here or maybe a counterintuitive way of doing this. There are some guidelines around, or there are guidelines on easy to read at EU level that is created by Inclusion Europe, so the umbrella organization for people with intellectual disabilities. But those guidelines are not really how easy to read looks in most member states. So we have, I think we have different best practices and ways of doing easy to read that differ quite a lot between the countries. And of course, that may be a good thing. Maybe it should differ because the difference is we have differences in grammar and how kind of languages work, and the solution for better understandability may well vary between languages as well. Another interesting thing, I think, from an accessibility point of view, is that in Germany, they have added easy to read and sign language to their national transposition of the Web Accessibility Directive. So it's legally required to provide easy to read to some extent. And that is, to me, extra fascinating, as there are at least two very different ways of, or schools or methods of determining whether something is easy to read or not in Germany. So if I try to explain it easily, it's either you have a set of requirements or criteria that you need to follow, like a checklist. And if you do this and this and this, then the result becomes easy to read. On the other hand, some people claim that that doesn't really prove anything, because to know if something is understandable or not, you need to test it with users. So that sounds very logical, but then how do you put together the perfect test panel, and how many users do you really need to test with, and what happens when they disagree, and what are the resources needed for that process, and so on. So you can have people discussing those kind of things at a very high level as well. But easy to read is used. I'm kind of focusing on problems now, but easy to read is very used and also, I think, very beneficial for users, for example, in books, so that people with cognitive or learning disabilities can read the same classics as their friends and family does. And there is information on complex democratic issues like how to vote or how the election process works and things like that, which sometimes are created more maybe for caregivers or people around the individual with intellectual disabilities than always read and understood independently by the user themselves. But so it's kind of often used and also deemed very beneficial for many people in many different situations. There's a wide range of use cases for easy to read. Also a lot of newspapers and news in the radio and TV and so on. On the web, which is where we have done most research on easy to read, there is another layer of complexity because of findability. So people who would benefit from easy to read may not even know that's what they're looking for, because they don't know the term. So they are looking for their actual topic they want to read about, or the question they want to solve. And also the agency or municipality, they probably won't translate all their 30,000 pages into easy to read. So somewhere there's a selection being made. And that may, of course, be exactly the selection that I was looking for, but more oftenly we find quite static and generic information that is read by quite few people, and not really the specific information that users require. So even in the Nordics, the concept and interpretation of what easy to read actually is and who it's supposed to support differs quite a lot. And we do not have our third panelist. Does anyone from my team know the status of that? Are we solving it, or? Nope, doesn't seem like we are. So I will then start with the panelists that I do have. So from Norway, we have Heidi Brunes Eklund, who is a linguist and text scientist responsible for plain language in the Norwegian company NTB Architects, if that is a good pronunciation. So Heidi, can you say something about what you are doing kind of from the plain language perspective, and what easy to read, plain language, all of this kind of whole topic, how that is handled in Norway? Just a short overview so we know where you're coming from.
Thank you. In Norway, we do not have a tradition for easy to read on websites, so we have a lot to learn. But we have been working a lot with plain language and universal design together. And then we are trying to make content and texts accessible, understandable, usable. So as a part of this picture, we also deal a little bit with easy to read. In our way, I would say. We do not have a standard, but we try to think that some solutions are necessary for some and good for all, also when it comes to the language.
Definitely, I think we can all agree on that. And then from Finland, we have Dr. Leila-Auria Leskele, who is the development manager of the Finnish Center for Easy Language in the Finnish Association on Intellectual and Development Disabilities. So from your perspective, what's the situation of easy to read in Finland? From the Swedish perspective, we're always a little bit envious of what you're doing in Finland. So,
no, well, thank you. Thank you, Susanna. I would like to say that we've been envying what you do in Sweden quite a lot, because you started before us in the 60s with Easy Language or Easy to Read. And we followed you first in the 80s. So actually, we've been looking what you do for a long time. But then I think that just like Heidi said, in Norway, they've had another approach to easy to read and to plain language and linguistic simplification. And so have we nowadays our own approach to what we consider is beneficial for these very different groups of people who may have difficulties with standard Finnish. But we do not either have a standard for easy language in Finland. We have more like guidelines, we have recommendations, we have tips for writers, how to use language so that it would be in the best way accessible for these groups. But it is like a constant work towards better understanding what really serves these people, and not that we would consider that now we have a concept for easy language in Finland.
Okay, thank you very much. And our third guest, who is coming in and out with different, I think she's now trying another computer to see if the microphone could actually also work, so that it's nice that we also hear what she says. It's Lisa Kashmiri, who is the chair of the International Society for Alternative and Augmentative Communication, ISAC, in the Swedish branch, and she's also working as a support supervisor in the social enterprise company Frösunda Omsorg. So she's very hands-on working with people with cognitive disabilities every day. So I would like to ask first, because this is really when I talk about easy to read with people outside of the accessibility community, they can't believe that it's true when I say that we don't even agree on the target audience. So that's a bit crazy. So who benefits, and are there situations where one size could really fit all, and where are more granularity needed? Because in some countries we have different levels of easy to read, and there are really different perspectives and ways of doing this. So if I start with you, Leila-Auria, what do you do in Finland? How do you perceive the target audience for easy language?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in Finland we have established a way of considering three slightly different groups of people who could benefit easy Finnish or easy Swedish. And the first one is means people who have permanent and inborn, or mainly inborn, need for linguistic support. That means people with intellectual disabilities, for instance, or people with developmental language disorders, dyslexia, or then such conditions like ADHD. Not saying that all these groups need easy language, but parts of them. Then second group are people who have suffered impairment of language skills during their lifetime, meaning, for example, people with memory-related illnesses or people with aphasia. And then as a third group, we often name those who are learning Finnish or Swedish as second language in Finland, so with immigrant background. So we have this rather large scale of people with very different needs for easy language. Did I now answer your question, or
Yes.
Did I forget something? Good.
No, I think that was very clear. So, so Heidi, in Norway, I know you are kind of trying to address this in a slightly different way, but who do you think needs more than plain language, if you will? I mean, what are the target audiences you see most beneficial?
Yeah. We discussed the same readers, but we also say that people in need of easy to read, they benefit from easy to read. It's very difficult sometimes to point out the people in need of easy to read. So I don't have the answer there, actually, but we also think a lot that people in need of easy to read are just, or they are also part of other a lot of different target audiences. They are not just in need of easy to read. There are also inhabitants and customers, taxpayers. So they mustn't just be seen as one group that are in need of easy to read, but they are in need of all the things that all other people are in need of.
So, and I think that's interesting because we have been doing, we're asking municipalities and agencies in Sweden how they go about all these things. So how do they make sure that people understand the content and so on? And it's very interesting because we ask the same questions year after year, but we get a very wide variety of responses on the expected user or target groups or the user needs and so on. And it seems like you could use kind of the same tool, which is called easy to read, that nobody really knows what it is, and you use it for everyone. And then it seems that it may not always match perfectly. And we have also seen that some people with dyslexia or reading and writing difficulties can be very almost appalled by an easy to read text, because to them it's like, I don't have an intellectual disability, it's just my reading abilities, and that's completely different things. So it's really hard to kind of pinpoint exactly how it's done. And I think also now I'm kind of inventing what I think Lisa would say also in this about the fact that people, migrants or people with another maternal language can of course also benefit, but sometimes exactly what they need and the level or the type of language or reading difficulties differ between them. So it's not always the case that an easy to read language that is made thinking about people with cognitive and learning disabilities would fit a person who just has another language. So I don't know, how do you, if Laura, I mean, you talked about very distinguished different groups, but is it then really true that they can all benefit, or how do you make sure that that they all get what they need out of the text?
That is absolutely good question, and it is not always possible. That we need to admit that it's not always possible to serve them all in the best possible way, because they are very different. But at the same time, I think the long work we've been dealing with and trying to get such guidelines that would be flexible enough so that each group could have slightly different materials in case needed. But then again, I completely understand that authorities, for instance, they cannot produce different versions of easy language web pages for all different groups, but they need to make compromises. And that is really difficult, and that is something that on which we need more research on. That is my understanding on the matter. But we've been doing testing on our materials every now and then, not constantly, because we don't have this kind of validation system as in some countries they have for easy language text. But when we test our materials, it is rather surprising that these kind of compromises can be found. They are maybe not best for one group, but they are easier than the standard versions. Yeah. So this is the way where we work on the text.
Yeah, so there is no silver bullet fixing all the problems, but there's some things we can agree on, and if you do that, at least it will be better than doing nothing for most groups. So that's rewarding, I think, for everyone, if you start working and you know that it actually benefits more than one user group. So Heidi, in Norway, I know because of your kind of slightly different way into this, could you say something about we talked earlier about the fact that how easy to read becomes kind of a separate thing, and you would like to have it more in one go. Could you say something about that?
Yes, I think it in many situations it would be ideal to have one solution for all. or better, that everyone could find what they need or what they search for at one place. So in Norway, I hope that we could get more easy to read instructions, for example, in forms, or that you could choose maybe a film or speech or graphic or what you want or what you need, but that it's in the context, not a separate path you have to choose from the start. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I have seen some example of easy to read text that look like you said, poems or textbooks that also the subject is about, or the text is about the subject. It's not addressing what you're going to do or the action you want to do. It's not guiding through the service or getting you closer to the service. So I think that if we can get easy to read, hands-on, that would be the best for many of those in need of easy to read as well.
Yeah, the kind of the worst examples that I still remember, I think most of them are gone now, but I mean, it was when this started happening, we saw many agencies having, this is an easy to read text. It's made because the other things are difficult. So it's an easy to read text about easy to read, which is probably not what the people need for it. It's more information. It's kind of such an internal perspective. It's kind of almost funny if it wasn't so depressing. But I think also what we see is that when easy to read is treated like a separate thing, that it's well, first of all, the selection, so it's just 5 or 10 maybe texts selected by somebody. We don't really know if that is what people are looking for, and then it's often forgotten. So we also see a problem with them not being updated, which I think is a big problem as well. So you need to have the quality assurance system around that as well. And if we could kind of merge it into the mainstream thing, then maybe that would be easier also to establish a way of making sure that it's updated for everyone and constantly. So and you touched upon kind of the user choice, which is my favorite topic. So providing alternatives, which I really think is what accessibility is about. So easy to read or easy language is kind of focusing on the text itself, the actual letters here, but many users need or prefer other channels or a combination of text, illustrations, audio, video, whatever channel you can provide them with. So do we have any best practices or good examples for when that is happening? So not only the text is made easier to understand, but also in combination with other types of formats or channels. Can you mention something about that, Laura, from Finland?
Sure. I agree that we should have more of them, and especially I would like to see an increase in audio support, so that we would have more, and video support, so that people who would rather look at images and listen simultaneously would have this help. So we don't have them enough, but we still are trying to develop these, and we have guidelines for how to create a good video material in easy Finnish, and what kind of principles could be named, how to construct this kind of material. And also we have just last autumn published a guidebook on how to use images on easy language material. And this is also that kind of information that has for a long time, that people have asked from us for a long time. I think that the impulse of taking care of the multimediality, is this correctly said? Multimodality in easy language materials actually comes from the users, because the users are asking for not only to have a text, for not only to have in one form the material, but to have the choice, as you said. So this is really important, and we need to do these guidelines and instructions how to use them together with the experts on illustrations, on images, on audio description. So we need to gather our knowledge on this matter and try to create functional guidelines how to do these materials.
But you already do. I mean, PapuNet and these organizations are already providing a combination of illustrations. That's what I said when I said that we envy you, because I've seen more of that in Finland than in Swedish, actually. But
okay, yeah, well, you asked for concrete examples. Yes, we do have PapuNet, where we have this bank of images free to use for anyone. I don't know how many thousands, tens of thousands images there are now at this moment, but it used to be quite a lot, different kinds of, so that people would not be only using one kind of images. This is also something that comes out in our testings, that people want easy language materials to be a variety of different kind of visual elements, not always the same kind of. This is one thing. Then also our easy language newspaper, Selkosanomat, that comes out also as an very simple version, which is supported with illustrations, and that is also free of charge to use on web. So this is one example where we try to promote multimodality.
Thank you very much. And from Norway, Heidi, in the kort fortalt, the kind of summary concept that you have worked with in Norway, how do you address this multimodality issue there?
Yeah, it's mostly about text, but it's sort of a level solution, or maybe the idea was that it would help people in need of easy to read to get what they needed fast and easy. But it showed that everyone liked this solution, actually. So it helped everyone to navigate on the side and to get what they wanted, or to move on to another side or information. So kort fortalt, or this short summary, is the essence of the text, with bullet points, easy sentences, and maybe also a link to the service, or to if you should apply something. So I think that has worked as a good solution in municipalities in Norway.
So just to kind of rephrase that a bit, I think that to me the kind of the concept or the idea is that the first page any user comes to is a short summary, very easily described, and kind of an overview of things. And from there, you can then go into the in-depth details of what you need. So the idea is that the short summary should help or be an introduction to some, maybe be enough for some. And then if you need more, you can go to the more complex, where if you have the kind of standard way easy to read works, then you have thousands of pages that are not so easy.
Yeah.
And then you have a specific place where you go to find the easy to read parts, and that may be linked, or the navigation can work in different ways. But that's kind of the two different concepts of this, if I'm...
Yeah, that's right. It's not that complicated. It's just in the start of each text. So, but you could develop this and make it more complex. But you start with the easy part, and that's good for all. So you get an overview in the start of the text, and maybe that's enough information for some.
Yes, and there's also in Sweden quite a lot of work going on with combination of easy to read and images. We have a very well-working institution in Gothenburg, in the West Coast, working called DART, who is also providing images and icons and so on. It has been sometimes, I think the difficulty is to find all these illustrations and icons, kind of the libraries, that they are sometimes not free of charge, and also there's a lot of them, and how do you use them together and all of that. So it's not super easy, but there are ways of getting around that, and there are also free resources nowadays that you can use in I think most languages, and also combination of icons, illustrations, and text in the same way. So that is becoming at least more mainstream, if you will, even if it's still not the most commonplace. And maybe who knows, maybe AI can help us generate images in the future that could be really supportive, because I have a few friends that I communicate with who are very nonverbal, and I'm kind of a text person, so I'm trying to write emails using a lot of images, and it's difficult if you are wanting to comply with copyright rules and all of that, and sometimes it's very, very difficult to find an illustration or an image that, you know, says what you want to say. So getting that help, I think that's something I really look forward to when the emerging technologies become a little bit more mature. So we are talking about definitions and supporting and so on, but how do we know that the easy to read really help? I mean, how do we measure success? If somebody wants to, I think we have in the audience today both people who are working on the supply side, providing accessibility services, and also on the demand side, who are, you know, have a website or a product or service they want to make more accessible. So how do we know when it's easy to read enough for that people understand? Is there a way to really measure this, or know that we have reached the goal, or something like that? How do we do that? Do you have any thoughts? Lea Laurea, do you know how do you do that? How do you know when you're finished?
I do not. The answer is I do not, and it's impossible because users are so different, and it is we are going there, but we are not there yet. So we have to just rely on the future and on research that will come in some point and help us with these questions. Maybe the artificial intelligence also will help us in the future with this question. However, I think we have different kind of professionals. We have people who are text experts. We have people who are experts in illustrations and images. We have accessibility web page experts. And then we have these experts who are on the field, to those who need easy language. And cooperating together with all this, we can find the solutions that serve not all, but most. So this is the way I think in a practical way we can little by little get further. But there's no like the best possible solution yet for this question.
And Heidi, in Norway, you said that the general concept, or the people are perceiving this as the kind of the short summary thing, that people are positive, so it's kind of helping everyone, or at least not disturbing anyone. But have you been able to measure somehow, or did anyone try to measure success, and how would you go about to know if?
Yeah, we have tested the texts in the process, so we that is our method. We have to ask the users and have a diverse group with different needs, not only when it comes to easy to read, but every solution should be tested with a group that has different needs. And then we test the different versions, and we get feedback and try to make a good text out of that. But we also have some criteria in Norway. It's or principles to follow. So we use them as well, and then we can test the results to see have we succeeded. But no measuring that I know of that we have.
I would say that kind of there is a reverse engineering way of doing that, which we always use whenever somebody wants to design a digital service or a whole website, and that is talking to the people who are sitting in the exchange on the phone, because when people start complaining about things, and if they say they can't do this or that, that usually means that it's too complicated. So I think if that could be one way of testing, is to see, in this specific service or this specific content, do we get a lot of questions? Then that may be a sign that the text is too complex. And when you make it easier, then if fewer people are asking the same things, then maybe you have moved in the right direction. But that's a very kind of complicated way of testing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Can I add a little bit? We also have easy language indicator. I forgot to say it. So we have 96 criteria for Easy Finnish text, and we can check a text according to this, but it is in a way different kind of information we get from this kind of professional testing than of those from the real users and readers of the easy language. So we need to look both of them and do testings simultaneously on both sides.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So thank you for all of this. We have got a couple of questions that I will try to read out. So the first question is like this. Since there are so many different groups with different level of language understanding, what would you say to the idea of an AI-based assistive technology for kind of translating hard-to-read content into easy-to-read? I'm thinking something like a screen reader or magnifier rather than overlays. This could run or would run on the whole system level. I think language models like GPT could be suitable for this task. Has it been considered yet? Who wants to? Yes, Lilauri?
Maybe I can start it. Yeah, we've been testing ChatGPT, how it could be asked to produce from more difficult text first to plain language and then to easy language. And unfortunately, it stops between plain language and easy language. It doesn't want to go to easy language. And we haven't found yet a way to prompt this more easy version of the text from ChatGPT. But of course, we are continuing the work, and it maybe takes a longer time with Finnish language because we are such a small language and we have so little that we can use as a material to teach ChatGPT. So I think you will be there reaching the destination before us in Sweden, maybe in Norway too, in Norwegian too. Sorry, Swedish and Norwegian.
I think we need much more data before that can happen. And there may be more Swedes than Finns, but we are still a very small language area. So I think we will have to go to England or English or Spanish or Chinese or something to see that happening. But Heidi, did you have any thoughts on the use of ChatGPT on this?
It's very interesting. We're also testing with plain language, but we haven't tested with easy to read yet. So that I don't have so much to say to that one.
So we did do a research project on this together with RISE a couple of years ago. So long before ChatGPT came into every household. So trying to do machine learning and AI translating, so to speak. And we actually found that it was too little difference between the hard to read or whatever that is and plain language. So it was really hard for it in Swedish to define that. And just because there is not enough data, even if we had thousands. So we got all that. So thank you if any one of you is here. We got all the plain language suppliers all over Sweden to support us sending in text. It was fantastic. The kind of the community feel of that was wonderful. And I thought, wow, we have more than 1,000 texts that are, the original text in the plain language is, wow. It didn't help at all. We need hundreds of thousands or millions, I don't know, but the volume of data you need to actually learn a machine how to do that, it's extreme. So that didn't work out. We learned a lot, but the result was not good enough for anything. And then we thought maybe we should try to go from original language to easy to read, because that at least the difference is wider. But then again, there is not enough easy to read texts in Swedish. So you would have to, you need to feed the monster with something. So I think there's still a long way to go before this can happen, but I'm sure there is a lot of interesting research going on in English, I would assume. And I'm sure there is, well, I know also commercial companies are working on things similar to this, and it will be very interesting. I think we will see it quite soon, but happening in a better way than we have seen so far. But for our small language areas, it will take time, I think. So, yeah.
Can I add something more? What I found in my little testings was that ChatGPT was able to transfer the language surface, from sentence to sentence in a little bit more easier version of from standard Finnish to, say, plain Finnish. But it was unable to change the text structures because when you produce easy to read material, you often have to change these text structures. And that was completely out of question for ChatGPT. So there is a lot to do, but let's see what happens.
Yeah. And the next question is, have you tried using AI like ChatGPT to convert text to easy to read version? I have tried creating custom GPT trained on easy to read texts compared to their normal versions counterparts, but the experiment failed miserably every time. So I think we already kind of touched upon that. So the next question is, do we foresee any legal requirements also in the Nordic countries when it comes to easy to read, just like in Germany?
Heidi, do you want to start?
I don't know, actually. Maybe I'm not the right person to answer that.
But nobody ever wants to answer anything about legal things. So I'm working quite a lot with the accessibility legislation at EU level and also in many of the member states, and I have not heard about it. That doesn't mean that it's not discussed somewhere, but I don't have any sign of that happening. But I don't know, Lauria, if you have, is there anything happening in Finland?
No, unfortunately, legislation is something that we haven't managed to get intact with the other developments. So we do not have a strong support, like you said, they have in Germany. So we do not have that. Not in accessibility legislation, not in language legislation, not in equality legislation. Nothing. They say really no word about easy to read or easy language.
And both Norway and Sweden have language legislation talking about plain language and that the language should be understandable, but it doesn't really define exactly how, and it also doesn't really cover easy to read. So we kind of go one step, but then not the whole step. So we have got a question. I don't know if this is the same, but can you explain the difference between easy to read and easy language? So that one is on you, Laura. I think we mean the same thing. We just call it different things, but yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. We used to use in English easy to read, but because I'm doing research on spoken easy language, you can't say spoken easy to read. It's like not a comprehensible term. So we started to use this easy language, which seems now to be in many European countries, the term that is like spreading all over. But when we talk about easy to read literature, for instance, of course, we use this older term, and I think it's quite the same. There's no really difference.
And we have another question that is, am I to understand that plain language is the same as simple language is the same as easy to read language? But I think these are kind of levels where when I say plain language, I mean what we are usually talking about. I don't know where this person comes from, but klarspråk in Swedish or Norwegian, which is a way that often public sector are supposed to speak, that you are speaking directly to people or writing using pronouns and active forms and not too complex, not the very academic thing, but making sure that most people understand what you're saying, which I think is just common sense and the way people are taught if they are studying communication. That's how you're supposed to write. But when people get very experts on a specific topic, then you tend to start using many complicated words because you want to show how much you know about this, and then kind of the jargon being, it's the same in accessibility. We are also idiots when it comes to using words that no one else understands, or doctors use difficult words and so on. So that I think that is what we try to do with plain language, is to make sure that we speak in kind of a common language that most people understand. Simple language, I think, is not a term that I would use professionally. I think that could mean a little bit of everything, but easy to read is, or as Lauria says, easy language is kind of rather well defined, made to support people with cognitive and learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, first of all, and then it has kind of evolved into also supporting people who have maybe another maternal language and reading and writing disabilities and so on. So it's kind of a step further from plain language. That's how I would go about. Yes, and Heidi.
Yes, we usually define plain language that a target audience can find what they need and understand what they find and use that information to get things done. That's one definition. So if people in the target audience need easy to read, that's actually part of the work with plain language. You could say it's very connected because it's general and it's you define the target audience for every text or every context. So I think that's interesting. We see easy to read as a part of plain language, sort of, in Norway.
If you are also going to find what you look for, then that's, to me, that is more UX or navigation, really. I mean,
Yes.
it's of course what words you use in navigation is important, but also if you can make a structure, even with super easy to understand content, you could make the navigation really, really hard. So I mean, the findability, I think, that's
yeah.
It's tricky to combine with the plain. For me, that's the plain language is the text, not the.
Yeah, I see.
That's an interesting aspect of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes sense then to work together with universal design to see that together as a process as well, because it has to do with navigation and the visual and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in Finland, we separate between plain language and easy language because we have noticed that in case we simply say that plain language actually covers easy language, and it is only that you have to know your audience and target your words accordingly. What happens concretely is that the language level remains too difficult for these groups of people. So easy language actually demands the writer to learn certain special features of the language and text production that are not so necessary. They can be in plain language text too, every now and then, but they are not so necessary for those readers. So this is the way we think it is. This is why we think it's necessary to separate between these concepts or language forms.
Yeah. And somebody had their hand raised, but now it disappeared. So I don't know if somebody wanted to speak or not, but just if you raise your hand again, I will open the microphone. I think that is possible, at least, but I don't know. Maybe it was just it's easy to push a button and then something happens and you don't really know how. So that's the technology part of all of this. So, and another question is about translation. So how does the content in Easy to Read translate, for example, between Finnish and Swedish in Finland? So how do you, I mean, you are bilingual from the start and then you are doing easy language in both languages, or you are mostly working with Finnish, I believe, but how is that? Can you translate or can you auto translate? Can you say something about that mix? Because it makes it even more interesting, I think.
Yeah, well, mostly I personally work with Finnish language, but we have this newspaper, Easy Language newspaper, Selkosanomat, which comes out both as Easy Finnish and Easy Swedish version. So in this newspaper, we quite much translate texts. And funny thing is that according to our experience, when we translate an Easy Finnish text to an Easy Swedish text, the Easy Finnish text remains more difficult linguistically than the Easy Swedish text. And so far, I don't know why. It's just funny observation we have made that in a way, our linguistic structures in Finnish language are from nature a bit more difficult. So this is a different we have noticed. But yes,
I could have told you without doing the test that Finnish is much more difficult than Swedish. I'm 100% sure.
Yeah, but it's really interesting what happens to a text. So we also have this kind of experience that, for example, if we talk an authority text, which they want both in Easy Finnish and Easy Swedish. And often they say that let's produce the standard Finnish version to easy Finnish version, and then we send this easy Finnish version to a translator. But in case the translator is not has not got training on easy Swedish, how to produce materials in easy Swedish, they often make it more difficult during the translation. So in that case, it doesn't work.
But if you translate standard Finnish into standard Swedish, and that's Finnish, and then standard Swedish into easy language Swedish, is that the case when the Finnish become linguistically harder, or is it when you do? Because now you're kind of
no when we ourselves.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, I was just thinking, doesn't it affect the result where you start? If you have a Finnish standard text from the beginning and then you translate it kind of in steps, what if there is a translation to a standard difficult Swedish and then you do the same translation there? I would think that kind of the way you come to the end result could possibly affect the difficulty.
Of course, but it is also a matter whether the translator gets information on easy Swedish. In case they do not have this information, so they instinctively make it a bit more difficult. So they do it. But in case they not have this knowledge, they've been trained on easy Swedish. So in that case, it is a bit easier than the easy Finnish version, which is strange.
And interesting. I would like to dig into that. That I can see the matrix of testing procedures that needs to be done to really determine where that came from. That's super interesting. And it reminds me of another kind of adjacent question, that is sign language and easy to understand sign language, or easy sign language, because we see that many people who really are in need of sign language are not very verbal in the spoken language, or they don't read very well. So the people who mostly need the sign language are the ones who are not so strong maybe in language and so on. And often they also don't have the same knowledge in the sign language. So when agencies provide sign language, that's usually a very high level sign language, very, very grammatically perfect and so on. But that may be kind of over the head of the people who use or are most in use or would benefit most for sign language. So I think there is always also a need for easy sign language, but that is for another webinar, but it's the same, that it becomes complex when you do the translation and then the sign language piece. So it's kind of similar difficulties we can see there. Translation is interesting. Languages are fascinating things, aren't they? So I'm very happy that we could have this webinar with the two of you. Thank you very much to my my brilliant guests who know so much about this. And when we just did the preparation, we talked and talked and talked, and I thought we would never stop. So I know we could have continued with this for hours. And I'm sorry Lisa Kashmiri couldn't join us, but we'll make sure that she gets to the stage in another webinar or so. And the last reflection I would like to do is, so we said that easy to read is not part of the legislation. So why isn't it? Do you have I don't require you to know why not, but your guess, why is this? I mean, we have more and more accessibility requirements around technical things and physical disabilities and so on. But I mean, what's the point of that if you don't understand the content? I mean, why would you find the thing and be able to come to the page and so on, and then you don't understand it? It seems to me like there's no use of having all the technical things in place if you don't understand the content. So why are we still in a situation where easy to read is not required in the legislation? Any thoughts?
That is a tricky last question you had. I don't know what you, Heidi, think of this, but I guess because it is about language. And sometimes when I've been talking in Finland with authorities who produce all the time material, they often say that, oh, this is so difficult thing that we need to put in our webpage and tell to people that really, you can't make it any simpler. You just can't. It's impossible. And then we say that, okay, you can't maybe make the whole of it easier, but you can partly make it easier, and you can take the most important points and simplify them, and then it serves another audience. But in a way, this is difficult for many authorities, at least in Finland. I don't know how it is in Sweden and Norway, but in Finland, it is difficult idea for the authorities that they should do these things, what you need to do when you produce something in easy language. I don't know, does this make any sense? But this is what I started to think.
Yeah. Heidi, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I don't know, but we in Norway we are getting used to plain language, and maybe it will come with time that we see that we need something more. But I think that many do not know about easy to read, that it's not the same. It hasn't been a part of the discussion yet in Norway, so maybe that will come.
Yeah. Let's see what comes. And then we have a comment here in the chat about the difference between kind of proper sign language in one sign language and then just kind of the signed version of the spoken language. And that does exist, absolutely. But there is, at least in the Nordic countries, there is kind of a conflict, I would say, between kind of the deaf community and others who need sign language. So it's not, but I agree, it's of course a way of doing simple sign, but I think we would need a level that is even simpler or easier to grasp. Okay, so we are looking forward to technology supporting us, maybe legislation, more awareness, and a lot of good thoughts from all of the Nordic countries. And I hope that we can learn from each other. And I will also ask both Heidi and Lea-Lauria to provide some of the links we talked about during this webinar, so we can send out when we send thank you email with the recording. So pointing to the criteria used in different areas and so on. If people want to read more, that would probably be in local languages then, but that's, I think, is fine when we do Nordic things. So thank you everyone for listening today. Next webinar in this series is on the 15th of May, and it's about mobile app accessibility in mobile apps. So very techy for developers and designers. So probably another slightly different audience, I can assume, but you're very welcome to join us for that webinar as well. And that will also be in English on the 15th of May. So with that, I would like to thank everyone, especially, of course, to my panelists, but also for my staff working in the background, and to the auto captions of Zoom, whoever is the kind of the ghost in the machine doing that, and of course all the participants asking questions and contributing to this. So thank you everyone, and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.